Okay, so today we're learning prototypes, inheritance, and classes. We'll also learn the this keyword, which will be also something that we'll cover for a little bit, the first part of the lecture. So today is the fourth day, so that means the next lesson is the sprint project. So today is the last day for this week, and this is the last lesson. So we'll see how it goes. So this lesson reinforces the use of this keyword, and it has many uses. After we learn about this, we will prepare to discuss prototypes in JavaScript and explore how they are in every aspect in JavaScript. We will introduce you to a powerful paradigm of object-oriented programming, OOP, in JavaScript. We will take a deep dive into these topics: the JavaScript prototype, objects, constructor functions, pseudo-classical inheritance, the class keyword. By the end of the day, you should be familiar with objects and how to use constructs and classes to build out objects and achieve inheritance across these objects. So that's kind of like the introduction of the whole lesson. So by the end of this lesson today, you should be able to explain the 4 principles of this keyword and demonstrate each explanation with example of their uses. Describe and use prototype and constructor functions in a new keyword, and pseudo-classical inheritance to build a small object-based video game. So we'll not be doing that. We're not going to be building a video game, but we'll focus on just how we're going to use the class. Describe and demonstrate how class syntax works. We'll cover that. Convert a pseudo classically instantiated program into class syntax. So this one will cover it, but if we have a time. So, I will point out all that. So let's get started. Let's start with this keyword. So in JavaScript, this keyword is not only in JavaScript, it's in a lot of programming languages. It's usually used when you're trying to create a object. So this keyword in JavaScript is a little bit different. It's different than other languages. So this keyword, usually how I explain it is that it's just like in the real world. So let's say you're at home or you go to your friend's house. Someone walks in the house. So a guy, a young person walked in the house, and you say, who is this? So who is this? You mean the person who walked in, right? So in that context, this means the person who walked in. And if you are looking, you and your friend are looking at like a screen or a tablet or something, and there's a picture in there, and then you say, who's that? So or you say, who's this? So saying who's this, you're pointing to the tablet or the phone. So it has a different context. You could use this for different things. In JavaScript, it's the same. So you could use this keyword to point it to different objects. So that's what this keyword stands for. So this all explains what this keyword is. We'll get started with the 4 principles of that explain this keyword. There's 4 principles that explain where this keyword, where you can point to. So how can you use this keyword in JavaScript? So let's actually open a code bin. I should have prepared this, but let's get started. Let's open a new one. Let's name it. Let's name it something like prototypes, and classes. Lecture notes. Let's save it, and let's just change the settings before we move on, and set up our environment. So now everything is set. So we will start with the 4 principles we just talked about. So the 4 principles, these are the 4 principles. So 4 principles of this keyword in JavaScript. Okay. So the first one we'll start with is window binding. Window binding. What is window binding? So in in JavaScript, the this keyword, if you just say console log this keyword. So if we just say now console log this, that's it. That's all. If you say that, code bin will give us an error. I mean, it will tell us, okay, we can't do this. See, it says log skipped. Sorry, this log was too large for our console. So basically saying we can't handle the amount of things that this keyword is pointing to. So that's why we have to go to the browser's console right here. And let's just say console log this. So what does this point to? So this is the window. Remember, you just say window here, and that's, so this is the global scope. Remember, we talked about global scope in global scope. We talked about how the variable var, it can be connected to window, so that this always point to in JavaScript. If you don't do anything and you just say console like this, and you don't connect anything to it, it always point to the window global scope. So let's finish the description here. Is not something that we aim for. So we don't aim. We don't want the this keyword by itself. So it doesn't do anything. It's connected to the window global scope. So and then we say if we don't give this keyword any context, if you don't give it any context, it will default to the window or the global object in Node, unless you are in and this one will not go deep into it, unless you're in a strict mode. The strict mode is an option in JavaScript where you tell the program run it in like a very strict way. Don't be loosey, and just make sure that everything is correctly typed. So we will not go deep into it, but I'll just explain in 1 second. In which case you will get undefined. So if you say, if you make the program use strict, if you say that, I think that's how it's spelled, and you give it this and you run it, it will give you an error. I mean, it doesn't give you error here, but let's see. So let's use strict somewhere else. Let's use strict JavaScript. So let's just see quickly what it is. So use strict is defines that JavaScript code should be executed in a strict mode, basically. So you just use that, and then it will make sure that this will cause error, because right here you didn't say var or let or anything. So basically you're making the program stricter. So it doesn't run here. But actually, let's actually no, it will not run here. So we will not be using that. But know that use strict is an option to make sure that your program runs smooth and you don't have any errors. But let's create a function here and call it something like city, and let us put a console log here. Console log, let's call it this dot name. Okay, and let's create something like another. Let's create a variable here, call it name, and this is going to be a what replaces this, basically. So this will say something like, let's say something like my citizen cloud. Okay, now let's invoke that function. Let's console log it, city, and invoke it. Let's see what this does. So this actually gives me the name. So let's actually change this to my name. Okay, give this my name. Code bin thinks that we're talking about code bin. So it gives us undefined. You guys know the reason, right? It gives us undefined because we this keyword points to the global, and there's no my name in the global scope. I mean, there is a my name in the global scope, but this one is constant. So we should say something like var. So let's see. Yeah, so that's what I meant by this keyword, if you use it, so this would basically mean window dot and then my name. So it's basically what we learned at the beginning of when we were explaining scope. So now let's maybe use strict now. Maybe it will not allow us to do that. So let's see. I think it will still allow. Yeah, cannot repurpose my name of undefined. Okay, so strict is not allowing us because this needs to be an object. So when you're trying to use this, the strict way is this has to have an object right here. So that's why the strict is not working. This is designed to work with objects. So that's window binding is basically this. If you don't use it for anything else, it will be connected to the window object. So let's comment that out. All right. The next would be implicit binding.
So,
Go ahead.
so are you saying that the function still has to have an argument in order to use strict to
so strict
run
will not run this. It will not work.
Mhm.
That will not work because it's expecting an object here. So my name is not
Oh,
object now, so it's just a variable. So
gotcha.
strict is expecting an object. So that's the only
Okay.
reason. So the next thing would be implicit binding, and I explained it here, everything, so you guys can read more about it too. Implicit binding right now. This is the one we're going to. So implicit binding, binding. So implicit binding, like the name says, implicit means it's implicit. It's not explicit. Basically, it's not clear. So it's basically whatever that this keyword is pointing to, that's what this is. So this is the most common use, and it's found in 80% of uses in JavaScript. So this is the best way to use this keyword of use cases. Okay, the next thing would be when the function is invoked. So when you're trying to figure out what this means, what is it pointing to? So when you invoke the function, when the function is invoked, and we'll see an example of this function invoked, look to the left of the dot. Okay, and that's what this refers to. Okay, and then the next point would be only this only applies to objects and methods, and objects in methods and objects. This only applies to objects with methods, and we'll see what that means. We learned a little bit about objects. Maybe you guys can guide me creating object. So we'll see how that looks like. Let's see. Use VS Code, if no one has issues with VS Code. So Zach said that you said maybe let's use VS Code. The reason I'm using CodeBin is it's easier for me to share the notes. So whenever I finish, I could share this link, and you guys also can copy and everything. But if I do VS Code, I have to put it in. GitHub and share it, and it could get lost in the weeds. So yeah, that's why we're using this. If you haven't any issues with this, let me know. Maybe we could use in the future VS Code. So help me guys create an object. Okay, we're gonna create an object called student. What should I do? Somebody guide me. Create an object. So what is the sign for object? Is it that? What is it? What should I use? Curly bracket or should I use straight brackets? How do you create an object?
Curly bracket.
Curly bracket. Okay, so curly brackets. So I want to create a name. How should I do it?
Name.
Mm-hmm.
Colon, then quotation, then put the value.
Value there. Okay. And then I want to create a city. We just do the same thing. Let's say something like Minneapolis. And I want to create a method within the object. How should I do it? I want to create a method that says say hi.
Method or function?
So I'll write say hi. Yeah, method is a function. So I'll write say hi. Should I just write the function here? How should I do it? Should I say that?
Semicolon. No, use the semicolon
Okay,
and then function, I guess.
function. Okay. Let's open the function. All right. So now here so this is called method, and it's a function in an object. So if you have a function in an object, it's called method. And we'll just console log a message here that says hi, my name is. So, and then how do I grab the name in here?
$sign
Uh-huh.
and then curly bracket,
Curly bracket. Okay.
and then inside this dot name.
This dot name. Okay, so you guys already know how objects work. So this is basically so this now here, right here. So we're talking about this. So we said when the function is invoked. So let's invoke this function and from outside. So how do we invoke that function? How do you guys invoke that function? This function, say hi. How do we call it from outside?
Callback function.
Callback function. So this function, it's in this object. So we want to call it outside. We want to basically print it here, whatever it says here, console log. How do we do it? How do you grab something from an object?
By array.
Array, okay. So the object, first we have to say the object name, okay? So we have to say student. And then remember that we said there's two ways to grab something from an object. There's the dot, and there is the dot notation, there's the bracket notation. So we're using the dot notation. So if you go back to the notes for the first lecture in this week, right here, that's why it's really important to take notes. We talked about objects here. So if you go down, you'll see that it says right here. So keep going. So we're talking about objects here. This is how you create an object. This is what it looks like. If you want to call it, this is how you call it. So you say user, which is the name of the object. And then whatever you want to grab from the object, you use the keyword right here. So user name or live JavaScript, whatever. So that's how you run it. So keep that in mind, and maybe go back to this when you're doing the assignment and stuff, because we're going to keep using objects. So prototypes and classes are completely like object. Everything's an object. So you have to know how to call object, how to grab something from object, how to get this function, all that stuff. You should have known. So let's say, okay, so now we're gonna call say hi, which is a function. We're just gonna invoke it. So now let's run it. So let's see what it says. Hopefully it runs here. So hi, my name is Mohammed, right? The reason it says that, so now we said here, when the function is invoked, which we did right here, look to the left of the dot, So this is the left. That's what this refers to. So this refers to this, so student. And you could actually check this by saying like something like this. If we put another one here, actually, let's put another console log here. And just give it a this. That's all. So instead of name, let's just give it a this, and maybe let's comment out this so it doesn't interfere. So now if you run it, it should print out the whole object. Actually, we have to give it something else, but it will print out the whole object from here like that. So all the way to here. So that's what it refers to. So it refers to student basically. So keep that in mind. That is implicit binding. So that's the best use for this keyword. Any question about this?
If you create if you have let's say you have a variable on the top, and then you said this, it won't grab that variable, right? Because
No. So
it's global.
yeah. So if we say something here, my name or something like that, and we say Abdi, if we say this anywhere, it will not work. So I mean, it will work, but it will just print out the name. So if we say console log here, hopefully it will do that. So if we say this dot my name, hopefully it prints out the name, since this is the global. It says undefined. I think we may be using strict. So yeah, it will not work. That will not work because this doesn't know what it's trying to what it's referring to, and this is not object, so it's kind of confused. It doesn't know what it's calling. And this is in the global scope. So it will not work with something that just like variable. It usually just works with objects. So if you see this, keep in mind it's an object. I mean, it's referring to an object.
So Taran,
Yeah.
so when you're saying look to the left on the dot.
This is what I'm talking about here, right here.
Okay.
So what is the left of the dot? Left of the dot. It's a student, right?
The student, yeah.
And right here is the student. So it's
So
basically
the student is the key. So the student is the key.
the student is the object for
is the object.
This whole object. Yeah, this is student.
Gotcha.
So this is referring to this whole object.
Okay.
So student is equal to this object. So that's what it's referring to. Yeah. So that's one case. Let's go to explicit binding. This one is a little more complicated than that one. So explicit binding is exactly what the word says. It's saying explicit binding means you explicitly describe where how you call this keyword, how you connected this keyword to how do you connect this keyword to whatever you have, the object. So some of the things about explicit binding is that there's call, it's a keyword, it's a function that connects the two things, connects the whatever you call in the method you call outside to the object basically. So this one is explicit. We don't use a lot this one, but you will see it sometimes in classes. So call will immediately invoke the function. So it automatically invoke the function. So that's one way. And then also it will argument one. Okay, so and also you have to pass the arguments. And we will so this one we have to use something called a object constructor, which is a function. So that's why we're saying you have to pass an argument, because we're going to use a function to create the object basically, one by one. Okay. There's also another one called apply, which is very similar to call. This will also immediately invoke the function. And also this one is the same. This one is different. So this one, you have to pass an array as an argument. So this one you will not see in the wild that much. You have to pass an array as a argument. So you will not see this in the wild because you usually don't want to pass an array as an argument. There's also bind. So this one is the last one. So bind, this one is you pass in arguments one by one. It doesn't invoke the function immediately. So you have to basically do more work. You have to call the function. You have to save it in a variable, and then invoke that variable as a function. And we'll see how that works. I'll give you examples. It doesn't invoke immediately. It doesn't invoke the function immediately. Okay. Instead, you have to instead it returns a brand new function that you can invoke later. Okay, we'll see now. So let's first start with a call. So let's start with call. So now we have to so let's create a function. And this function, remember that remember here functions are objects. Keep that in mind. Functions themselves are objects. So function is student, and now let us do console log here. Let's go console log here and do this dot name. Okay. So when we do that, let's actually call this my name, because CodeBin has issues with that. My name, or yeah, my name is fine. And then let's create an object here. So let's say, so these are like a copy of this. So we're trying to create a copy of this. Actually, we have to add, yeah, it's fine. Let's create a student one. So we're creating a copy of this function, basically. Object one. Yep. So object one, we'll call it. We'll give it a name here. Let's get my name here, and give it something like Fatima. Okay. And let us create another object here from just that this function, and give it like student two. So we're gonna try to connect this with these. So that's what we're gonna do by using call. These two, and then giving a different name, something like Farah. Okay. So now this is where we use the call. So we're gonna take this function and connect it to these. That's how this is gonna know what this is. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna say student dot, we're calling this function dot, which is an object. Remember, functions are also objects. Dot call, and then call is a function, and then we're just gonna add student one here. Just student one. So what this is doing is it's taking this function, which is an object, normal object, and it's connecting it to this. It's basically binding. So that's what it's doing. That's why we say explicit binding. We're basically explicitly connecting these two. So this is the function, and this is the object, and we're connecting these two. So that's how you connect. So this. So let's see what this prints out. Okay. So now let's call it. Let's comment that out. Run it. Student has already been declared. Okay. Yeah, it's right here. See how it's saying that students already declared, because function is an object. So it's basically, it already knows that there's another object called the student. So let's see what this does. So this should print Fatima right here. Okay. So we're basically connecting, we're saying, okay, this name is referring to Fatima right here. That's what we're connecting to. So that's what call does. It basically calls this, and it connects it to right here. Okay. And we could also call the other one too. We could say student dot call student two, and it will just print out Farah. So Fatima and Farah. Okay. So that's basically call. And so this, what it does is, let me just write a note about this so you know. This invoking the function here. It's invoking the function here. So, and what we're doing is we're passing this function as an argument for this. So for right here. So that's what we're trying to call, what we're trying to say. So basically this function is this, and then dot my name is this, right? So invoking the function here, and we're passing this as an argument to the function. Okay. So that's how we connect these two, right? Does that make any sense? I mean, we're not going to be using this a lot, but so you just know that what explicit binding is, and if you ever see this call method, you know what it is. Any questions about the explicit binding? But the call, only the call. We're gonna go to the other ones. Actually, we're not gonna try apply because it's exactly the same, but you're gonna pass an array. So instead of us passing this object student1, we're gonna pass an array. So we have to do something like this. We have to say that, and then that's, instead of saying student2, we could just process it right here. So that's the only difference, but they're exactly the same. So that's how you pass, and then you just put another object here, right? So this is how you could do apply. And if you pass it, you have to say this apply, and now you could call each one of them, right? So hopefully that, I mean, I'm not sure if it's gonna work. Let's try. So you have to pass an array. I think it's gonna give us an error. We have to give it the number of which array it's gonna select. But usually you will not see a call, and I can give you an example if you guys want. So let's go back. I don't want to confuse you guys with more examples of apply. But that's call. Let's try bind, which is very different from this from the call. So let's put it right here, bind. Okay. So bind, the difference between bind and call is that bind creates a new function. We're going to do exactly the same thing. We're just going to grab this. It's going to be exactly the same. And let's comment this out. And then we're going to call it in a different way. So now instead of doing this, student.call that, we're going to create a new variable here. We're going to say constant. So let's say parse student equal to, and then now we're going to do student dot bind, and then we're going to connect to student1. Okay, so we're just saving this into a variable, into this variable, and it becomes a function, and we can invoke this later. So we can invoke it like that, like this. So we have to just say first student, and then invoke it like that. So if we run it, that should bring it the same thing, furthermore, right? So that's the only difference between bind and call, is that bind, you save it in a variable, the function right here. You save in a variable. So this will not work. If you try this, that will not work from what I remember. So if you run this, it will give you an error. So yeah, it will not even do anything because you're not even invoking. Yeah. Any questions so far? So keep these in mind, because they will come up sometime when you're doing classes, especially call. You will see call and bind several times when you're doing classes and React next section. So that's that. If we don't have any question, I'm going to move on to the next one. Yeah, go ahead.
So on the last binding, where does the student1 refer to?
So student1, we put it right there. So right after bind.
Well,
yeah.
Well, I mean, like the first student came from.
First student. Okay, so you're right. So first student is a variable we created. So
Okay.
one of the rules of bind is that you pass an argument one by one, which we did,
Mhm.
which is like this. This is one argument, and you pass it into this function. Another thing, it doesn't invoke the function immediately. So right here, when we were doing the call, if you do this, it will just print it out. So you don't have to save it anywhere. But so we said instead it returns a brand new function. So the first is the brand new function. So you have to set it to a new function or new variable. This whole thing, otherwise it will not work. So you have to put this in this new variable, new first student function, and then invoke that function later.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the first one is a new variable. Gotcha.
Is a new variable we created to save the result of bind in here, and then run it here. So that's all. Any other question? All right, let's move on to the I think third way of using this, which is called a new binding. Okay, and it's in the lecture. So if you go down, you'll see new binding right here. So this is a new binding we're gonna learn now. So new binding, what is it? So we're gonna say new binding using the new keyword. So this is a normal keyword that's in JavaScript already created for you. Keyword, okay. Constructs a new object, okay, new object, and this points to it. So this points to the new thing that we created, and we will see what that looks like. When a function is invoked as a constructor function using the new keyword, this points to the new object that's created. Okay, the new object we created, that's what this refers to. So let's see example of that. Let's create the same thing, the student function, which is an object, normal object. So right here, I'll make a small note. I'll say, so I'll say here, I will need to pass in my arguments one by one. Okay, and here create a function. Let's call it student. And as you can see here, we're using capital S here. This is a way to tell the other developers, other people that are going to look at your code, this is not a normal function. This is it's a constructor. It's called constructor. So this is called constructor. Constructor function. And it basically it's an object that it basically gives you a blueprint, basically. So it's the starting of the class. Remember class, if you read the thing, it will say class is like a blueprint. So this is a starting of class, and we're using function because functions are actually an object. So right here, we're gonna open it. We're gonna give it two parameters. We're gonna call it, since we have issue with the name, we're gonna say my name, and here location, okay? And right here, we're gonna say this dot my name is equal to my name. Okay, it's called constructor, so it constructs a blueprint for us. And this dot location is equal to location. Okay, so this function basically creates a blueprint for us that we could use to create something else, to create a new object, basically. So first, so if we want to create something, a new object, a new thing, we have to we have to put it in its own variable. So we say constant, and we use the same thing. Let's say student1 equal to, now here's where we use the new keyword. So new student, and here we give it a variable. We give it a parameter, the name and the location. So let's call it something like Ahmed. Let's call here San Diego, something like that. Okay. So So let's explain what we just did. So the new keyword basically creates creates something from this blueprint. So it creates a profile like this profile from this blueprint. And now we could just console log. Let's console log. Let's console log student1 dot location. Since student1 is an object that we created, it's a new object. That's what the new stands for. It should give us the location, San Diego. Okay, so that is the new keyword, and this is only when you're passing the arguments one by one. We will see how the next step is. We will see how you don't have to pass one by one. You could pass all of them at once. Any questions about that one before we do the next example of this exact same thing, but in a different way? Okay.
So the last part is that a new function.
So this is a new object. We're creating this new object from here. We're saying grab the location and grab the name and the location from here. So and put it in this new and put it in this function in this object. So we're creating a new object and putting it right here. And the object is the so actually let's actually print the whole thing. Let's print the student1 so you can see it. So let's print that. So as you can see, it's an object. It's a new object. So instead of us creating a object one by one, just like we did at the beginning, this one is a function, and you say, okay, I want the object to look like this, to look like exactly like how you did it here. So if you add more stuff here, you could give you more here, and also right here, because if you don't give anything, the parameters, you'll get an error. So if you don't give anything here and you just do that, you will get an error. So if you run it, because it's just like the normal functions that we had. Well, it says undefined here because we didn't define it. So that's basically a way to create a new object. Okay, so this is the new.
So
yeah.
All right. What if you have two objects? How does it know which one you wanted to choose from?
So let's create another object. So let's say constant student. Let's say student2, and we say equal to new student, and let's say Muhammad. Let's say Ohio here. Okay. Now, the way it knows is that whatever you call, that is what it's gonna print. So if we call here student2 right here, it's gonna print out student2. Right? It's gonna print out Ohio.
No, I'm talking about if you have a copy of the function, the top one.
Oh, if you have a copy of this, exact copy of this. So if you have exact
and then
copy,
you change the name. Just make
name here.
Students and
so
student.
let's call it here age or something like that. Okay, put it here age. We could put it here age. Okay, now it will give you an error. The reason why it will give you error is it will say you declared a student 2 times, right? Remember that
change the student
right here
to students with S.
So this one is students. Okay, so now this is completely different. So it will not even know this exists. So right now, if we run it, it will just point to this. So the reason why we're doing that is because we already declared here, right? It's connected from here, right? So
I didn't see that. See that.
So if we want to connect to this, we have to say here students. We have to do that students. So that's how it will call. So that's how it's connected. It's by the new, and then it says, okay, create a new object from a student student function, which is an object. All right. So that is the new keyword. Let us try a different example.
So you're saying that if you trying to add another function, then you gotta change the new student as well, so in order for you.
If you want to add something else like this.
No, really like As a query, just point it.
Oh yeah. So the object when we said student
The
S with
new
the S,
student has to.
yeah, with the S, we have to do it like that and create a new
Okay.
student S from there. Okay.
Okay.
Let's see a different example of this, because this one is we're passing one argument one at a time. So this one we're gonna pass. So this one we're gonna pass all arguments at once. Okay. So we're just gonna create the same function. We have to comment at the top one. Let's say student, and here we're gonna put attributes. So this one you could call it whatever you want, but it's a keyword. It's a word that combines all the attributes, all the arguments. So now we're just gonna do the same thing. Dot my name is equal to my. Then here we're gonna say it's different. We're not gonna say my name here. We're gonna say attributes dot my name now. Okay. All right, and then we're just gonna do the same thing. This dot location is equal to attributes dot location. So this one is basically the same thing at the top, but now you could pass as many attributes as you want, and it will just check if that attribute exists here. And we could just
there needs to be a equal sign beside this dot location.
Oh yeah, you're right. Thank you. But here's the thing about this one: you have to pass an object to it. So here's how. So we did the student thing. So let's just do the same thing. Student one. Okay, and new. Let's say student, right? So same thing, but now instead of passing one item at a time, you pass an object here. So you say, so you could do like that and say, my name is equal. My name is, let's say, Ahmed. Same thing. This is a normal object. So location, and here let's say San Diego. Okay. So it's the same thing we did, but it is it's passing an object here. So let's comment this out and run this console log. Okay, let's console log student one dot location, for example. So we should have San Diego. So it's the same thing, but now it's passing one thing, which is attributes, and attributes refers to this whole object, right? And then when we pass this whole object here, so let me get my drawing thing. So this whole object right here, where is it? Okay, sorry. This whole object basically refers to the attribute. Let's undo it. Okay, so this whole object right here, we put it right there in attributes, and then it just looks for, okay, is there something called my name? So it finds in my name. Is there something called location? It finds the location right there. And then after that, it just says, okay, let's replace all that with Ahmed and San Diego and print that out, right? I think that makes sense. Similar to the top one. Okay, so this is still, we're basically going through this keyword. So this keyword now refers to what? Who can tell me? What does this refers to? When we do this and we invoke it, what does this refers to?
Object.
The new object we created here. You're right. So the new object we created here, which is right here. So if we just kind of invoke this or get this, it will just print out that. So now this is the this. So this refers to this object. Okay. So that's all you need to know about the new binding, basically. Any other question about that one?
Ustad, didn't you say it's gonna pass all of them one time?
So that we did that. So we passed this object in here, right? Instead of saying like my name, location in here, we just took this object and put it in there, right? But we have to still declare the information about the object in here, right? Within the object. So it's one object. That's what I mean by one time, passing everything in one time.
Okay, instead of saying my name Ahmed or saying location separately. Okay.
Yep. Instead of saying separately like that and putting my location, Ahmed here, my name, we just pass everything in an object, and that object just goes right here to attributes, and then it finds that information in here and prints it out. So we covered these few things: new binding. We covered explicit binding. We covered implicit binding, and then we also covered window binding. So those are the 4 principles you need to know about today's lecture. So explicit binding, new binding, which we just learned, and explicit binding, we learned it has the call, the apply, the so right here, so it has a call. Should have written more about explicit binding here, but it has the call, apply, and the bind. So, and new binding is, we just learned new binding, and also implicit binding is the this keyword. So it's the one that we actually used in the first object we created when we were learning object. So whenever you call, whenever you have implicit binding, it means that anything to the left of the dot is this. That's what this is. So this refers to anything to the left of the dot. And window binding is basically the global object. So if you just say this, it means the window bind. So like if we do this and we console log this, so we just say console log. Just this is a review for people who weren't here. So if we just say that, it will just print out the window object. So that's what it is. Okay. So we're gonna move on from these principles. Any questions? All right. So let's comment this out. The next part is the prototypes. So let me see how much time we need, because we can take a break. So prototypes. I think we should take a break because prototypes is completely different, and it will you will need to refresh yourself. So we'll take 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and start prototype, and then after that, the last part will be classes, and we might go over the time, depending on how many discussions we do, how many questions we have. I want you guys to understand prototypes. I want you to change prototypes to classes, and we will learn all that. But prototypes and classes are extremely important for the next section of this whole school. So if you understand prototypes and classes, the next section will be really easy for you. So that's why we need to take a break and kind of like take a new fresh look. So 10-minute timer. Okay, see you guys in a minute. Okay, let's get back to it. Let's get back to it. Hope everybody's back. You get your coffee. Mashallah. Oops, sorry. Didn't mean to do that. Okay. I think I closed the Zoom. I tried to close it. It didn't close. So that's good. Let's get back to it. Let's start with prototypes. Somebody's unmuted. I think it's Zakaria. I'm muted. Let's start with prototypes here. So what are prototypes? Let's see. So prototypes. All objects in JavaScript have a prototype property by default. That's true. So now let us actually go here in console log. Let me show you that truth, that every object in JavaScript has a prototype property. So let's actually just create a quick object. So let's say something like a home, and then just give it a empty object here, right? And now let's get that object. Let's say home and run it. Now let's look at the property of this, right? It has a proto object right here, and the proto has so many properties. Starting with constructor, which we will learn a lot today. It has all these properties that you could use. So that's it's already built in. Prototype is already built in objects. So in JavaScript, this property is used as an object to attach methods and other properties that can be delegated down other child function objects. So it's used to basically when you create a new copy of the object, it's a way to send information to that new created thing. So that's what prototypes are used for. In JavaScript, it's not a class-based language. So there's a lot of languages like Java and other languages. They have a pure class. So the class is already built in the language. But in JavaScript, the core of JavaScript is prototype. When it comes to object-oriented programming, JavaScript doesn't have a pure class. It has prototype, which is a method or a property that's connected to the object. Object is everything in JavaScript is an object. So everything in JavaScript has this proto, other than the basic variable and things like that. So if you have let's say an array, so let's actually just declare basic array here. So keep in mind that array is an object in JavaScript. So let's say something like my array, okay? Say equal to an empty array, right? That, and invoke that, my array. Now, if you look at it, it has proto. So array is an object, function is an object, everything in JavaScript is an object. So keep that in mind. If we create a new function, just like we did the array now, it has the prototype thing. So in JavaScript, class is just basically a dressing. They call it syntactic sugar, which we will learn. We will learn class. It's a dressing on top of the prototype. There's many places that JavaScript does this, and we will learn more of that. It basically takes something that is a little bit different than other languages. So if you came from, like, let's say Java or other languages, you will not see prototype. So you will not see prototype. I mean, you will see in some languages, you will see prototype. But the way that JavaScript uses it, you will not see it in most of the languages. So to make it easy for developers to come from like Java and C# and other languages, to make it easy for them, they created a class on top of the prototype. But the core of JavaScript is prototype. All right. So now we know where prototype came from. It came from it's a thing that's connected to objects in JavaScript. So let's see. Let's write down our notes. So we're gonna say here prototype and constructor constructor functions, and we will learn about the constructor functions. So constructor functions construct construct other objects. So there are objects that create other objects, and we will learn that. We already learned that when we were doing the, I think, the new binding. When we were doing that, they give us they give us the ability to pass methods methods across objects. Okay. Also, another thing to keep in mind when you're creating a constructor function, and we will create construction function before we do the prototype, because you need to have an object to add to connect to the prototype. So that's why we need a function that creates objects, like we did in the new binding. So capitalized function name, you will want to use capital. So this is a way to tell other developers, as I said, to tell them that this is not a normal function. This is a function that creates other objects. Also, missing a return statement. So constructor functions, they don't have a return statement. Okay, and also they work with this. So they work with this. They use this, which is which we learned right here. We said where was it? Not explicit binding, but implicit binding. Implicit binding, we're using this right here. We're using this. So mainly we will use explicit binding because it's 80% of the time you use explicit binding. So that's what we will use. So let's start and create a constructor function. So we'll say function. Let's call it person. And remember, we capitalized the first letter of the function name. Let's give it attribute. We learned this in a little bit. We learned it in when we were doing the new keyword, I think. And then we'll say this age is equal to attributes dot age. We'll say okay, this dot my name, since we cannot use a name. Attributes dot my name, and we'll give it two more things. This dot hometown, let's call it hometown, is equal to attributes. So this is a blueprint. So keep that in mind. It's a blueprint. Like when you're creating a house, when you construct, when you're like a engineer or architect, when you're an architect, if you want to create you create a blueprint, and that blueprint you could create more houses or more homes or whatever from that blueprint. So we're creating the blueprint now, and then we'll create more objects from that blueprint. Okay. Okay. So Zakri, I think you said you put this around the key. Which one? So this the first this.
This keyword, and after a missing return statement, then this. Not the code, the comment.
Oh, the comment. Yeah, you're right. So it doesn't confuse people. You're right. Thank you. Definitely. So this, and also I have to give it a context. I have to say something like, we will mainly use this keyword. Makes more sense. Okay. And then this on hometown. Hometown. Okay. Let's give it a method. So this method, we're gonna call it speak. Okay, and give it a function here. Like that. I'm in the function. Just return, and then just to say hello. Hello, my name is. We'll say the usual stuff, which is template literal. This dot my name. Okay, and I am from We just copy this, paste it, and change this, let's say hometown. Okay. So this is a constructor function. This is called constructor function. Constructor function. Okay. So that's a constructor function, and we will create a new objects from this. So this is basically, we already learned all this stuff. So now we'll say constant. Let's create a new person. So this is a person. So let's create a new person. Let's call it something like, let's give the person Hamdi, and let's say new person. And now remember we said we could pass an object in there. I'm just gonna copy the person's information so we save time. So age, and let us change this to my name. Okay. So now we're basically just basically putting all this information in here. We're not even using everything. We're not using even the age on all. I mean, we're using the age. We're not using this function. All right. So now we could just call this as usual. We learned this. This is kind of like a review. Console log. Let's call it Hamdi. Okay. So now that should give us the information about Hamdi. Okay. So it's an object right there. So and the object has already the function, and if you open it, as you can see, it returns the function by itself. If you want to run the what do you call the method by itself, you just say Hamdi dot speak, and then you invoke it. And if you close it, you'll see that it will do this. So this basically we learned this. So we already know this, right? So now let's add this. So here, the reason why we're going to use a prototype. So we're going to add a prototype here, and we will learn how to add that. Add prototype here. The reason why we're adding prototype is that if we wanna, so we already have the method here, and we're calling the method, right? So if we want to use the method again, let's say we can create someone, a new person, and this is called I don't even know that word. Let's actually look at it. Instantiating, yeah. So let's see. It's a specific word. Instantiation. Yeah, it's called instantiation because you're basically creating a new. Instantiated right here. So that word. So right there. So it's everywhere. It's basically instantiation is creating a new object from constructor function. That's called instantiation. So let me actually copy that word. Just get the different word. Instantiation. It's exactly the same. All right. So let's put it right here. New object instantiated. Okay. So we're getting a copy from this. So now we have another one. Let's call it something like Shukri or something like that. Shukri, okay. And now Shukri, let's call her Shukri, and let's call it here Cloud or something like that. Okay. So now every time we invoke, so let's invoke Shukri's information. So let's say console log Shukri. And maybe Shukri does speak because we're focusing on the speak part because that's where we're going to put the prototype. So prototype doesn't affect the rest of this stuff. It only affects the method. So that's what it affects. So let's invoke these two. So let's refresh it. So now the problem is every time every time we call speak, this function runs, and that's not what we want. We don't want the whole function to run, and it creates a new function. So it has a function. The more objects you have here, the more it creates the new functions here, and eventually it will slow down your whole program. And if you search, in the internet, you will see that that's what it does. The reason why we move this function outside and put it in a prototype is that it slows everything down. And you could actually Google why do we use prototype in JavaScript, and here Google already gives you, but if we go here, this article, just to give you a reference of why we use prototype, is that it uses, so if we use prototype, it uses less memory. And there's a lot of examples here. This is basically what it does. So this is basically the function we're creating. This one's called animal. We have person, right? We have person here. And the function here, so as you can see, every time you create a new method, or new object, it creates a new function inside the object, inside of this function, right? And that's going to take a lot of memory from the computer and your browser. So that's why we're using a prototype. That's the main reason why we use prototype. So let's create a prototype from that. So let's copy actually this. We learned this, so I will not say any questions because we already discussed how to what this new keyword is and all that stuff. So now let's actually copy this and put it in here and comment this out. Okay. So now we're gonna add this to a prototype. The first step of prototype, creating a prototype, is removing this from here. So we're gonna copy it. We're gonna copy this part and remove this whole thing. Okay. So now the next step is creating the prototype. So how you create prototype? You see, you call the function or the constructor. You say person prototype. You say prototype dot speak, because that's the function that we're trying to create, and then equal to the function that we created. That's pretty much it for prototype, right? It looks weird. It's not the easiest. It's not the prettiest. By calling the function, by calling this function, which is a constructor, and then giving it a prototype, you're basically saying every time we create a new, let's copy these. Every time we create a new instant of the constructor, just call this function. Don't recreate a function here, but call this function, and it's much easier for the memory. It will only take like one function call. So all the objects that you created, it only calls this, and it just returns different things according to whatever the object kind of like gave us, right? So that's why we use prototype, is because we don't want the function to run multiple times within this function, right? So we move it outside and we say dot prototype dot speak, and that's how you create a. So the dot speak is where you could call it whatever you want. So dot speak, this one is the function name basically. So now you could create a different prototype for different people. So this person could have different prototypes. This person could different prototype, and you could connect them that way. So, but yeah, so if you call it, it's going to be the same. So if we say console log, let's say console log Hamdi dot, let's say speak, right? We should have exactly the same thing. So these are all commented out. So you should call the prototype. I'll actually give us an error. So 160. Let's see. Oh yeah, right here. So we have to do that. Okay, so let's run again. So it should call the prototype. So how do we know? How does the prototype know to call this function? Can anybody tell me? How does it know to call that? They separate it, as you can see.
You made a reference. You say person dot prototype.
Person dot, yes. So it's connected because we're saying person dot, and then we're calling the prototype method, and then we're saying, okay, take this function, which is right here, and then every time a person calls, let's say if we run Hamdi and this function runs, call the prototype and say, okay, run this function. So that's what we did. Any questions about how to construct the prototype? So this is basic, the starting prototype. We will learn one more thing about prototype and then move on from it. Any questions? Okay. So
what about the child? Something about child.
So that's where we're going. So the child thing is when you want to inherit the constructor. So you could create inheritance. So this is where the prototype and inheritance came from. So if you ever heard something like inheritance, this is where it came from. So that's what we're gonna get to now. So let me know if you have any question about what we just learned. So let's create. So for example, now you want to create a child for, let's say, Hamdi. So you want to give her like a child. So you want to describe create an object for Hamdi's child. So how do we do that? So we create a new function. We're gonna call it. So this is, let's call it inheriting from person. Okay, we're inheriting from person. We're basically getting something. So from person. So let's call it function. Let's call it child. Remember capital letters. I mean the capital first letter. And then let's give it a attribute here, just like we did attributes here. So attributes, we're just gonna call this one. You could call it whatever you want. We're gonna call it child attributes. Okay, and do the same thing, but here is where the difference comes. Okay, so if you want to connect this child function to this function, the person function, we want to inherit. We want to get these properties. So we don't want to write them again. So if you do this, if you just copy this and write it again, what is that going to create? What is that called in programming?
Hard coding
Hard coding. It could be
or dry.
dry.
Repeating.
Dry so you want to keep it dry. Don't repeat yourself. So it's acronym. Don't repeat yourself. So now what we're doing is we're creating a new object or new function, and then we're doing the same thing again. We're doing the same thing again. We don't want to do that. We just want to grab all these attributes from top, and that's what it's called inheriting. Inheriting in Somali is dhaxalo, in la dhaxlo. So the function correct, right? This function person. So how do we inherit? Remember we learned something called calling. So the binding, the explicit binding we learned, that's what we're going to use now. So this is one of the cases that you will use explicit binding. Remember we learned call. And how do you use call? You take this function, and if you want to connect it to an object, you say, okay, you call it like that. So now we're connecting the person to the child, right? To the child here. So that's how we're going to do it. So we're going to say person dot call, and then we're going to say this, and then child attributes. Okay. So this usually confuses people. We're calling the top function, the person. We're saying call, which is basically bind or connect to this. What does this refer to here? What do you guys think?
Person.
Does it refer to person or child?
Person.
You think person? Okay. Let's actually console log it right here. This, okay? Let's call this function. Let's say child. Let's invoke it, okay? Let's comment this out. Let's see what it calls, what it gives us. It could give us an error or something, but let's see what it gives us. Sorry, kind of age, okay. Oh yeah, because it's calling, we're doing this, so let's comment this out actually. Okay. So now let's invoke this. So it will not run here because it's saying it's global, but just to make it clear, it's referring to child, right? It's referring to child because now we're basically saying, remember how we created call. When we said call, we said add student one here, and then that's how you connect. So student one is this now, which is this, and this is an object because functions are object. So child is this, and the attributes are this. So these are the attributes we're gonna get. So the attributes, these attributes are actually these exact attributes. So it's the age, name, and home, right? I'm not sure if we can actually console log. Let's see. Let's try to console log right after the person. Let's console log attributes, child attributes. Let's see. I just want to make it clear and call this function child. Let's see if it runs. It's going to give us an error about the age, cannot reach age because we didn't define it. So we have to kind of call it. But it's basically now we didn't add any age here so that you know that this child is referring to all these properties. So this is it ran on the first step. It said, okay, we didn't define this. So now you have to define it, right? So it's referring to the child attributes is referring to all the attributes of the person. So this is how we connect the child to the parent. So this is inheriting, and then now we're going to create a new object from here. So let me put a little comment here, so it's clear. Let's put so this one is I have to tell the child to inherit from its parent all the attributes. Okay, and this is how you do it. You say person.call and then this and that, and then you could also add your own attributes for the child here. So all the specific attributes for the child is going to go here. So you could create your own attributes for this. So we could create something like this dot something like hobby or something like that, play, and then create a something here, right? So you could create its own local thing for it. But now it's gonna grab everything from the parent. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. You wanted to say something? Okay. So the child attribute, now we have it. So how do we create a new object for the child attribute? So we did that. Okay. So how do we so now we have all the attributes, but we don't have the method. We don't have this method. How do we grab that method from the parent? Right? So to do that, actually, you're going to learn a new thing. So here's, we can write a comment here, tell the child to inherit its parent's methods. This only inherits person and not let's say Hamdi, which is one of the objects we did. So it will not inherit information from the object we created. It inherits from here, which and this one. So now this is how you inherit. So we're going to use something called a object.create. So we're going to say child, we're going to call this function, and then we're going to say prototype, okay? And then we're going to equal to object. This is a special thing in JavaScript. So object, you have to write it like that. Object create, and then say person.prototype. So we're creating a new prototype from the parent prototype. Okay? So this is all messy because it's that's why we moved to class. So nobody uses this anymore. So if you're thinking about this is how we're going to do programming from here on, this is not how we're going to do. This is the old way of doing it. So, but it's good to learn because this you will understand the core of class, how JavaScript works. So this is how we grab the method from this person function, is by saying child.prototype. So the prototype of the child equal to object create a new object, which will be the prototype of the parent, right? That's all we did. So now we could create a new instant of the child, right? So we could say constant, let's call this child like Mursal, right? And equal to, let's say, new. So here we're going to create a new child. Are we going to say new person or new child? What do you guys think?
New child.
New person.
New person. Okay. Remember, we're basically inheriting information from person, right? So we're gonna say here new child, right? Because we already grabbed all the information by using this line, right? So new child. Okay. So new child, and then just the basic stuff of creating the object here. So we're gonna say age. We're gonna equal to like 7. Because this is a normal object, we're gonna say my name is equal to, let's say, Mursal, and then here we're gonna give it hometown. And where are we getting all this information from? Where are we getting all this?
Person.
From person? Yes. So we don't have all this information in this function because we're inheriting it from person, and person has all this. It has all that information right here, right? So that's how we inherit it. So now we could just print it out. Okay. Okay. So let's actually, and we didn't create a prototype for the child. We just copied a prototype from the parent, so we can create one for it. But first, let's console log Mursal. Let's say Mursal, maybe like Mursal hometown. Let's say hometown. Okay.
Are you
So-
able to say
so-
Merciful.speak?
We could say that we did not create the prototype yet. We didn't create the method yet, so we're gonna create that now. So we're gonna say here, so here let's write our comment here. So create new method from the child. Okay. So we're gonna say child dot prototype dot we could say dot speak. Oh, here's the thing. So that speak already actually exists. That's the thing. So you ask actually good question. So before we even create a new prototype, we have the ability to say child that speak. So console.log Mursal.speak. How is this possible? So let's actually run it. And it's gonna give us, hello, my name is Mursal and I'm from St. Paul. How does it happen? Can anyone give me a clue of where that came from?
Inheritance.
The inheritance. Yep, it came through the inheritance. But remember, we created a new prototype from the parent, the person's prototype, right? So just creating that prototype from the person's prototype gave us the ability to use the method, the above method right here, this method. It gave us the ability, right? So that's why we're calling speak, and it works normally. But you could also create a brand new prototype for the child. You could just say child dot prototype dot play. Let's say play. We're going to create something for a new function. And this is anonymous function, as you can see. We're going to say console log. And let me just copy the message so we save time. Okay. Right there. So it just says, hi, my name is this, and I love playing soccer, right? So I want somebody to help me and replace the soccer with whatever we want. So instead of hard coding the soccer, we want something like basketball or whatever the child the child likes. So how do we do that? Are we going to add it to the parent, or are we going to add it to the child function? Or here? Because if we add it here, we it will say undefined. So let me give you an example. So let's say this that sports, let's say, equal to attributes dot sports. Okay. Now, if we run and grab the parent, if we try to run the parent, let's see, if we just call one of the parents, let's say Hamdi, and run that, it will show undefined here. So right? That doesn't look good, right? Especially if you're trying to do something with this object or something like that. So we have sports, but it's undefined. You don't want that, right? So you don't define. So if you want to define something local or specific to a child child object or child function, you go to the child and you just add it right here. Remember, we said if you want to have a specific attributes for this child, you name it here, and we're gonna change this attribute to child attribute, right? So now we could just put it right here and call it whatever. So we're gonna say sports. We're gonna say something like soccer, right? And replace this with a dynamic word, right? Right. So we're gonna say sports here, right? So now if we run, let's say we have another child. There's another child, but he likes different sports. So as you can see here, it says, where is it? We didn't run that one. Okay, let me comment out, Hamdi. Okay. And let's go back here, and we called speak. We didn't call play, right? So that's why it's not showing anything. So let's take this down here and call it play. So if we run it, it should give us the hometown and then the message, right? And we don't even have to call it console log. That's why it's giving us undefined. So we're gonna run it. So now it says play soccer. We have let's say we have another child. Let's copy this and paste. Let's call this child something like Mohammed or something like that. Here, Mohammed. Let's say he's like 18 and likes basketball. So now if we go down and we say here, instead of Mursal, we say Muhammad.play. We should have that message from Muhammad likes playing basketball. So we have two messages. So this one says my name is undefined, which is not good. Where is it? Why it says undefined? I think I misspelled it or something. Let's see. My name spelled everywhere correctly. My name. Okay. This one. Okay. If you have any errors, it's always because of somewhere. So run. So you should say now, my name is Mursal and I love soccer, and my name is Mohammed and I love to play basketball, right? So that's how you make it dynamic. So this is a child prototype, and that's how you create a child prototype. Any questions right now? We don't have a lot of time, so we're trying to go over this complex subject, just to help you understand. Anything you're confused about, how we create a child object, how we create this constructor for the child. So let's actually name it constructor for the child. Let's go for the child function. Okay. So basically we have this function. It inherits all the information from the parent, which is the person, and then it inherits the prototype from a person, just like that. Now we created objects here, and if we want to create a new prototype, this is how we create a new prototype for the child, and we could just call it whatever, and we could also call it speak here for Muhammad. So you could use multiple prototypes. So if you run that, it should say, hi, my name is Mohammed. What is it? Okay. I don't think we added that. Why is it not calling? So new child Mohammed. Boom, boom. Okay. Let's see. So speak. Did I spell it correctly? Oh, okay. I think you'll have to cancel log it. Maybe. Is that the reason why? Okay, let's try that. Yeah, so we have to cancel like that. So my name is Mohammed and I am from St. Paul. Okay, and we could give Mohammed another city, all that stuff, so you could play around with it. Let's say something like I'm from Minneapolis, this one, and they will say that. Any questions so far? We're gonna move to classes. That's all about prototype, how to create a prototype, how to create inheritance in prototype, and how to do instantiation in prototype. Right? Okay. Let's comment this out and move on. And you're expected to create this prototype in the assignments and also in the sprint project. You're expected to create this or have this and then create a child object from it, and then also create the prototypes, create a child prototype, all that stuff. So now we have this, and then the next step is to convert all this to class. So instead of having all these prototype, all this there, you're not gonna have that when you go to class. So keep that in mind. So let's comment all this out and clear this. So the next step is class. Maybe we should take a break. What do you guys think? Classes is big. So let's take a break, maybe 5-minute break. We don't have a lot of time to explain it. Let me see how many things we need to write. Okay. It's not too much, but it is also something that we need to learn. That's really important. So let's take 5-minute break, refreshing, and then come back, inshallah. 5-minute timer. Okay. See you guys in a minute. Okay, let's get back to it. All right. Let's see. I want to just check a screenshot of whoever is here for future reference. Let's see. Give me a second. I'm gonna take a screenshot of the time too because I'm not gonna have the time to save it. Okay, let's see everyone. Okay. All right. Let's get back to it. Classes. So classes. Let's read a little bit of what we wrote here. Gives a little more context. Okay, before we reach inheritance. So here we say, okay, because the original prototype system in JavaScript is rather clunky. I think you guys agree that. We said like all these prototype, dot prototype, child, all that stuff. So it's rather clunky, and because there are multiple ways to skin a cat, achieve inheritance, we have the class keyword to simplify our lives significantly. With the introduction to class keyword, however, we gain a lot of abstraction. So the class keyword actually, this how class is written, was introduced in JavaScript to 2015. So the ES6 we talked about, remember the update that was done to JavaScript, they introduced class. So that's why it's kind of like a new thing in JavaScript. And here it says we gain abstraction. Abstraction is basically it hides all that prototype, chaining, all that stuff. It hides all that stuff and it gives us a clean way of like doing all this inheritance and creating objects. Which is why it's extremely important for you to have seen how to achieve inheritance with what we know as a pseudo-classical inheritance pattern. So that's what we have seen before. Once you're familiar with how prototypes work, how inheritance is achieved through a pseudo-classical pattern, and how to implement constructive functions, you're going to love how easy it is to do this with a class keyword. So we just learned the prototype. I mean that was really difficult. I mean it's difficult for a lot of people. So when we go to class, you're gonna love it. It's gonna be like really simple. So with ES6, we gain the ability to use the what is known as class keyword. So you start with class instead of the function, the function that we were using that was creating the objects. We're not gonna use that anymore. It's gonna be abstracted within the class. The class keyword is what we call syntactic sugar. So this keep in mind, syntactic sugar is it's not really something that was changed from JavaScript. It's something that was it's like a dressing. So we basically hide in the prototype and bring in the class, but underneath the class is a prototype. Okay. Syntactic sugar on top of the object built into JavaScript and objects of prototype system. The class keyword is not a new way of achieving object-oriented programming in JavaScript. So it's not a new thing. It's just a addressing, as I said. You already know how to work with classes because you know all about constructor functions. We did that. So constructor functions are right here. That's what we've been working with. The person function. This is a constructor function. And the object prototype. So we did that too. Working with the constructor functions to achieve object creation in JavaScript is a fundamental to understand how classes work. So that's a really important point. Remember that classes in JavaScript are just a special function. So keep that in mind. They're a special function. They're not something new. There are two types of ways that we can work with defined classes. So let's actually. So that's kind of like more of a reading part than kind of like just I wanted to read that so that you guys have a concise understanding of what classes are. Okay. So let's see. So let's write notes about classes. The first thing about classes is it has something called extends. So extends. So extends is a word in classes and it links up links it up, the prototype, which we call dunder. So we call the prototype dunder proto. Why do we call it dunder proto? Because it has two let's actually look at. I'll show you what dunder. What do we mean by dunder? So when we were showing you the prototype, it had two lines on the both sides, right? So when we said something like I think we said my array. So right here, it has two lines here, right? These are called dunder. So dunder, so links up the dunder proto, and proto. It tells us where we came from, and that is the extents. So extents tells us where we came from, and it's in class, and we will see example of that. Also, extents tells super. Super is another keyword that we will learn. So it's called super. It's like that. It's a function inside inside the class. Uh, it tells what to so if you're inheriting, so the inheriting part of the uh, actually sorry, I think that's the inheritance notes. So let's actually write the actual notes. So I was writing the wrong notes. So before we even do that, let's define classes. Classes are not hoisted. So remember we learned hoisting. They're not hoisted. So if you call the class from above and you define it at the bottom, you will get an error. So this means that if we are putting information above the class, we have referenced it, and we have referenced it will not work. It will not work. Okay. So, and also here, when we're creating class, it uses strict. It uses use strict, and we learned that at the beginning. We use strict is basically a JavaScript of saying become strict. Don't give the person options to do whatever they want. So this prevents window binding, which is the first thing we learned. Will return undefined, and it forces us to write a cleaner code with errors if we don't write a cleaner code, we'll get errors. The third thing would be methods are special syntax. So the methods that we learned in the prototypes, they are special in class. And we will see how we write the methods. So they're written in a different way, syntax. So they have a special syntax. And the last thing will be a constructor is feasible. So the constructor, we were learning the function, it's actually inside the class, and it's kind of like you write the constructor word. So let's write, actually, before we get to the child one, let's write a class function, a class keyword. So you start with class, and then you say the name of the class. So here we're going to say parent, and this is like the person that we learned, and then you just open it. So this is class basically. Now inside the class, you have to give it one thing to start with, which is a constructor. It's the constructor function we learned, but this one is inside the class. So we're gonna say we're just gonna give it the name constructor, and you have to give it that name. You can't give it a random name like whatever. You can't call it whatever you want. And now we're gonna give it attributes here. We're gonna say attributes. Okay. And this is not a curly bracket. This is because it's a function inside the class. We're gonna open as a function right here. So we're gonna say this dot my name. We're gonna do the same thing we did. It's equal to attribute dot my name. we're gonna call it here. We're gonna give a close it here, my name. Okay, and we're gonna say here this location. Let's say it's equal to. This is not equal. We're gonna say attribute dot location, and we're gonna say this dot work is equal to, let's say, attribute dot work. Okay. All right. So these are constructor stuff that we have to do for the function. I mean, for the class. Now, how do we create a method within class? Okay. Remember, in prototype, we have to like basically put the method outside and give it a set it equal to a prototype. So now we don't have to do that. Here is a method. So this is how you create a method within a class. So this is all you have to do. That's how you create a method. You just put it right after the constructor is finished. So, and you can put as many methods as you want. And we're going to return here a message. We're going to say something like, let's give it a that and give it this dot my name is a, okay. And this is going to print out a message. So I'm just going to write that. This dot work. This dot work. Okay. So this is class. This is basically class. This is how you construct it, right? And this is the method. This is the constructors, the constructor, and these are all the properties of the constructor. Okay. How do we? So before we do that, how do we grab something from the class? Okay. So if we want to call the class, we can't just call the class. So this is a blueprint. You cannot call a blueprint because there's nothing in there. There's nothing concrete here that we can grab. So just like we were doing the creating a new keyword and creating something new from the constructor, we're just going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to put here build our objects. Okay. So to do that, we're going to say constant, let's say mom equal to new parent, and then just do the same thing we did before. So we're just going to call it, we're going to call it my name. Let's call it something like, let's call something like mom. Okay. And give it here. This is a normal object. So let's say location USA, or let's say MN, Minnesota. And let's give it a work. Something like shop owner. Okay. All right. So that's how we create a new instantiation from this class. So to initiate this class, that's how you do it. And we don't need to use any prototypes, anything like that. If we want to call this, we're just going to call it normal way. So now if we want to call mom and print mom, so all we need to do is console log mom and dot whatever. So you could say dot location, let's say. Right. So now if we don't have anything else, we should print shop owner. Okay. I mean Minnesota MN. Okay. Well, it gives us an error. All right. So we didn't build something correctly. Oh, attribute, not attributes. Attributes here. So okay, I was wrong. So now if you run it, you should say Minnesota there. Okay, let's call the function now. Let's call the job method. Okay, so we're just gonna say console log mom dot job. Okay, just like that, and it should print it out. It should say this message. Mom is a shop owner, right? And you could call whatever here, right? So this is it. I mean, we don't need a prototype. We could create a new project here. I mean, new object here, and call, let's say, yeah, we could create a new mom from here if we want. But I mean, you could call it mom2 and then call it here mom2, and it's going to be the same. Let's say here, work, let's say something like school teacher, something like that, right? And if we call it here mom2, it should print out mom2 is a school teacher, right? Mom2 school teacher. So now, we're not calling the function multiple times, the method. It's basically in the background, it's running the prototype, but we have just class here and it's doing the work for us. So now it's pretty easy, as you can see, and it's much cleaner than all the prototypes and stuff we were doing, right? So any questions about class before we move on to the child, how to construct a child from it? Any questions? All right. I think the class is a little bit easier, so it's easier to understand. Let's create a child from the parent here, this parent. So the way we create a child, okay, so inherit parent, okay. The way we create is by extending it. So it's called extending in class. So we're gonna create class, we're gonna call it child, and then we're gonna extends parent, right? And that's how we're gonna grab, instead of doing all those all the binding stuff, we don't do all the binding stuff here. So we say class child. This is a new thing that we created. You could call it whatever you want. A child extends, that's a keyword. You cannot call it whatever you want. Parent, the reason why we call it parent is we call it parent here. If you call it something else here, or lowercase or something like that, then you have to call it lowercase right here, right? We have to give the child its own constructor, okay, function. Let's give it something like child attributes, just like we did last time. Child attributes, okay. We also have to give it something else. Remember, we talked about something called, actually, we didn't talk about. Let's actually write notes about the child, okay. There's few things to keep in mind about child, okay. So child classes, okay. The first thing would be extends links up the dunder, which is the basically like this proto. It tells us where we came from. Sorry about the phone. Where we came from. Okay. So extends tells us where we came from right here. So it says child and then extends. Where did we come from? Parent, right? So that's basically what it's saying. And then also extends tells super, which is a function, what to super to. Super is basically the super is the same thing as we're doing the binding. So super is this. Where is it? This is super. So person.call. So it tells us, and extend tells super, which we'll write here. Right here is a super. So let me write down that, so you guys can see how it's written. Give a second. So we're gonna say here within the constructor, we're gonna say super, and then we're gonna say attributes here. Actually, child attributes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna say child attributes. Exact same thing. Okay. So that's a simple function that basically connects the child to the parent, and it tells this constructor where to point to. So to point to parent. So it's something that you just use. Basically, there's not really anything you could do about it. We cannot leave it. If you leave it, it will kind of like give you a wrong information. So always when you create a child and you extend it, always put constructor inside it, put super. That's like the what to start with. Okay, and then after that, you already inherited all these methods, all these I mean the names and stuff, you already inherited, you have it now. But if you want to add something else, you could add it right here if you want. So let's add maybe one method. Okay, so we're gonna say not actually a method. Let's add something like this dot major. Okay, we want to give the child a major, so it could be an older child. So we're gonna say this method, and then we're gonna say a child attributes dot major. Okay, so now also if we want to give a method for just the child constructor, the child class, we could put it right here. So we're gonna say something like study and open it and say return. To save time, I'm gonna copy the message right here. I'm gonna put it there. So it's basically saying this name is studying this. So we're gonna give the actually it's not this name, it's this my name. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. So now this is how to extend or connect the parent to the child, right? This is all we have to do to get started. So now we have to create a object for that, for the child. Any questions before we create the object about what we just did here? Any questions? Feels like you guys slept on this one. So let us move on and construct an object. So I'm assuming you guys understand how to create the constructor. So if you don't have any question, it means I'm assuming you guys already understood what we're doing here. So if you don't understand something, maybe send me a private message if you don't want to say it and publicly, and we can point it out. If not, you could talk about it, no problem. Okay. You guys thinking, huh? So that's good. So Khadija said we're
A little bit.
Good. Okay. So good. So now this is the child class. We're gonna create an object for it. Every time you create a something, this is the blueprint. It needs a real thing, which is an object like that. So let's create the real thing. Constant, let's say like a daughter equal to, let's give it my name. Okay. Give it something like, what did I write? Let's give it like, let's give it like Fortune. Okay. And this is a normal class. So we're gonna say location. Let's say MN, no problem. Let's give it a work. So let's say student. Let's give it a major. And remember, major is not part of the parent class. So there's no major here. So that's one thing to keep in mind if you want to create your own extra what do you call thing. You could put it right there. But you already grabbed everything from the parent. You want to add something to it, you could do that. And also, if you want to nest, if you want to extend the child itself, it will grab this and also from the parent. So if you want to create another nested class, okay. And major, let's give it something like nurse. Okay. All right. So now let's call the daughter. Okay. And the daughter has her own method. So console log daughter dot, let's say something like my name. Let's call it console log my daughter dot what did we call study. So this is her own method. And do we have access to the parent method? This one, job. Do you guys have access to that? Can we console log it here? Can we say something like that? Let's see here, job connected to daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. I don't know.
All right.
mean, I think you made reference to the parent, right? and
Yes.
and it is within the parent object
Okay.
class.
Okay, good. So yeah, so definitely, so we grabbed everything from the parent. So the methods, everything. So the method and all this constructor, we grabbed it. So that's why we have super and we have extend. Those two keywords allow us to grab the methods and also the other properties. So okay, so now let's run and see what we get from the daughter. Okay. So, okay, we have a problem. Study. Is that how it's spelled? Study. Okay. Okay, it's not a function. Okay, where is this coming from?
You said it's started with the ing, right?
No, I said just study here. So study. And this one I said study here too. Maybe I
Okay.
misspelled the daughter. Let me just write that. But I didn't. I mean, I just have exactly the same. So let's figure out why the study is not working. So this is a new method for the daughter, child. Okay. Let's try it again. Okay, type error. 272. Okay, that's a line. 272. So we're calling it here, and it's not printing out. Okay. So there's an issue with the calling. Let's see how we did in here. So we created a function job.
We didn't
Okay.
create the object from the
Well, I think it's this. What is that? What is it? Couldn't hear. Okay, let's try that. Still giving us an error.
I think line 250, you didn't create the object literal for the study.
Oh, you're right, you're right. Okay. Major. We have the major. What did you say we didn't create?
The object literal for the study, line 250.
Line 250. Oh, okay. You're right. Study. Yeah, we don't have the study. Okay. So the study, so this one is the name. So we have it from my name here. And here we have the major, and this is the major. So this major, maybe it's wrong. Child attributes. Maybe this is wrong. You never know. So all these look legit. This, that, okay. Let me just look at my notes for a second. Okay. And let me copy my notes from here. Let me just paste this here. Okay. I think I misspelled this something. Okay. Daughter.study is not working. Okay. Let me go back and see daughter.study. That's exactly how I have written it. Let me just double check. Nurse, all that stuff. Nurse, maybe this is missing. Major, okay. Boom, boom, okay. This should work. All right. So line 72. Okay, let me move this up here. I'm not sure why it's not working. Let me clean it up. Oh, I know where this is coming from. I know where it's coming from. We didn't create the new thing for the daughter. Okay, so we have to say new. And now we say new, but are we gonna say parent or child? Okay, so we're gonna say child, right? Because we're grabbing something from the child, right? So I think it should work now. So sometimes you're gonna have problems like that. Actually, we're missing one more thing here. Put the object in that. So now should work. New child. Okay. Still the name is missing. Studying nurse. My name. Yeah. So sometimes this is what you need to do, kind of like figure things out. Look for where the problem is coming from. So now the name is not showing, but it's showing on the first one. So the reason why is because here it says name instead of my name. So you kind of have to look at what you have, where the error is coming from, all that stuff. This is important. Yeah. So we're learning debugging on the fly. So that's how you create a child object from a child class that we inherited. It inherits all the properties from the class, and we added our own property. We create our own method, and you could also inherit the old method from the parent, which we did job. Fortune is a student, so as you can see. So this is generally it for creating a child. Another thing we could do is we could create another child from this, right? We can nest things together. So let me quickly do that because we don't have a lot of time. So you guys already know how to do that. So this is a child from a child class from child. Okay, from child. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna say we're just gonna create class here. We're gonna say class, let's say grandchild extends child. So this is kind of like nesting basically. And then we just don't have the time, but I'm gonna copy the constructor information, which is this right here. So we just create constructor attributes. You could call it whatever you want, these attributes. So we could call it like grandchild attributes if you want. So like that, to make it clear. So let's do that, and let's do it here. Okay. So now we could add a new method here, call it play, and then open it and give it a return. I will just copy the message. It will just say something like this child is, it says so and so plays with their toy. So, and remember we added a new property here called toy. So this belongs only to the grandchild. So now if we create an object for that constant, let's call this grandchild equal to new. Are we going to grab the child or the grandchild from this?
Grandchild.
Okay, good. Grandchild, because that's what we're getting. That's where we're creating this object from. And then we're just going to give it a name. We're going to give my name is, let's give like Abdul Halim. And then location, let's say the baby crib. Okay. Let's give, if we say work here, we have to say undefined. That means we didn't define the work. So because it inherited work. And let's give major, let's give it something farce words, something like that. Toy here, we're just gonna say toy fire truck. Okay. So now we could just call that information for the grandchild. So we don't have a lot of time. So we're gonna console log. Gonna console log grandchild. And we're just gonna call the method that we had, play. Here, play. So let's see what that gives us. So the last one, unexpected, line 286. Okay, right here. So run again should give us a message. Abdulhalim plays with their toy fire truck. We could say here with his or with her. Yeah. So that's how you inherit a child class. Any question? Any question so far about classes?
No.
Okay. All right. So it seems like the class is this is the main class, the child class, the class that we inherited from the child class, and then these are the all objects that we created from that class, from all those classes, and then we run. So that's pretty much it for classes. Let's look at the assignment.
My question.
Yeah.
So every time you're doing this prototype,
Yeah.
you have to do uh, you have to create a new objective.
Yeah. So every time you create a new class. The class is like a blueprint. Imagine the class is like a what do you call a engineer or a architecture architect. So pretend like this is an architect, and he said, okay, we need to build a house that that has, let's see, this one, the parent one. We need to build a house that has these attributes. It has a name, location, and work. And we need to give also one method, one function. So go ahead and create a house like that. So now you're gonna go and create. We created a house like this. From that, we could create another house. So it's like that. So the class or the constructor function is a architecture. So that's it's a blueprint. So you don't have anything concrete here. You don't have any message or any name here. So it's a blueprint. Another thing to keep in mind is that you need to be able to convert a prototype to a class. So you need to be able to look at a prototype function, a constructor function, and turn it into a class function. That would be one of the things that you need to do. So this one is, where is it? Where's the constructor? This is not. This is the inheritance. This is a constructor function when it comes to these prototype. So now this you need to convert it to a class. So quickly, if we do that, we can say class person. We're just gonna actually no, we're gonna open it like that, and then we're gonna say constructor. We're gonna give it a attributes. So these attributes right here, and open the constructor, and then we're just gonna copy these and put them right here. And so right there, and we have a prototype method. So instead of having this prototype, we're just gonna grab all this and go in here and create speak here. And I think you just paste that right there. And this is the class for this prototype and this constructor, right? So that's how you should be able to convert it. Use the same name, everything, same attribute, all that stuff, right? So that's basically it for creating the constructor from a prototype. Any question? Okay, let's just quickly look at the assignment for today. The assignment has you have to do all this. So you have three things. The first thing is that this. I might change something from. Let me look at it. It's been like months since I created this. So so what we're gonna do is so this first one, it says you work on the principles, the 4 principles we talked about. So here you just write what the 4 principles are, and you write out a code example of each example above. So you write what they are and a code example of each one of them. So that's what this is basically. The next thing is the prototype. So make sure you do the prototype before you do the class, because you need to convert the prototypes to a class. read this information. Actually, this is the game that I talked about in the assignment, in the description when we were talking about training material. So you will be building a game here using prototype. So read this description. You need to create a constructor function with all these methods. Methods and also attributes. Okay, and then just read all this information. You will understand. So it gives you all the information you need to put in the game, and then here you will console log, and this is what it should print, basically. So I already gave you the console log. All you need to do is just build the game using constructors and prototypes. When you finish with that, go to class, and then class you just convert. So here it says in this assignment you'll be creating a class named person and create whole family from a class. Actually, never mind. So this one you will create a new class called the person and create a whole family from here. Create a person class, give it a name, age, hobby, properties. Also give it a method speak and say, okay, I think we just did this in the lecture, so it's pretty easy, straightforward for you, this one. Yeah, so and then you extended the person class and create one class for each member of your family. So this one, make it personal. Look at your family, your dad, your mom, whatever. So and then create like your sister, brother, all that stuff. So make it a little more personal. But yeah, that's your assignment. Okay, any questions? All right. Okay, guys, I will let you go and have a good night. I will see you tomorrow, guys. Tomorrow's assignment day. It's Friday, and it's assignment day, and then on Saturday we have the sprint project. So keep working, and also send the old code, the old assignments. Make sure that they're make sure you send those, even if you didn't finish all of it. Make sure you send. All right, guys. Thank you very much. Take care.